Welcome to the PSP Educational Workshop. My name is Jamie Austin, and today's topic is Office Technology and Equipment. With me today are Connor Robinson, Director of Business Development at TechWorks, and Eric Goodstein, SVP, Sales and Marketing at VoIP X. Welcome, gentlemen.
Be here, Jamie.
Thanks for having me, Jamie.
It's nice to have you both. We're going to put you both to the test. So, for our gallery of attendees, feel free to stop us at any time and ask a question. So, Connor, information technology, MSP, what does that mean and why TechWorks?
So MSP is a managed service provider. It is a full service outsourced IT firm solving day-to-day IT problems, making sure businesses are working as securely and as effectively as they can be. So rather than hiring an internal person or sometimes working alongside an internal person, an MSP is the outsourced IT department, making sure that, oh, Eric's going upside down. Making sure that, again, the company's being secure, that they're doing things the right ways, and making sure, most importantly, that their employees are working as efficiently as they can be.
Okay. Can you give me an example?
So very often we find that the IT role in an organization is being held by someone who should be doing other things, you know, the office manager, the admin, who doesn't really have much expertise in technology. So they're often, Googling the problem or trying to figure out, a Band-Aid to a solution, whereas a managed service provider is a little more proactive than reactive. So, when a problem breaks, that office manager may do what they can to try to fix it. We're going to do everything we can up front to make sure that problem doesn't happen to begin with.
Okay. And would I be accurate to say two things? Are you ready?
I hope so.
One, you guys are professionals, so you know what you're doing. So you're getting, people who are dedicated to and have multiple resources of information and resources. And then the second thing is that you're a cost-effective process. In other words, I'm not paying a full-time employee who's probably not being fully utilized. So again, I'm saying the two things is, one, I've got an employee who this is like a part-time job to them and they're not the expert. And two, they're not doing this on a full-time dedicated basis.
Sure. So often a managed service provider can save a company money versus having an internal IT person on staff. So let me attack that first real quick. So if you had an internal IT person on staff, you need to pay them benefits. They're going to take vacation. They're going to get sick. They're probably going to leave at 6 o'clock and do whatever they do in the evening. Whereas a managed service provider is more than just one person on staff. A managed service provider has a team of technicians, engineers of all different levels, compliance experts, consultants that are helping drive the business forward. So we're watching over your network 24/7, 365, so you don't have to worry about your technology. You can kind of focus on what you do best in your business.
All right, making sense. All right, staying with you for a little.
TechWorks is we do a lot of business with TechWorks, and we've had a lot of great experiences with them where we have a customer and they're able to come in, they're able to review the network, do diagnostics, and find the problem very quickly so that our customers are able to, in our case, use their phone system more efficiently and not have call quality problems due to what's going on in their network. So they've been great. We had a situation with a funeral home and they were able to determine that the wire was the problem, and they ran a whole new wire through a outside pipe and replaced the firewall. All of a sudden the customers working just like brand new. So they're a really great company to work with, and they very professional.
Nice to say. It's always good to have a nice referral. Is it fair to say, I'm going to jump, it's okay, I'll jump back and forth between the two of you, but is it fair to say, Eric, that you and phones are heavily integrated with Connor and with IT and technology?
Yeah, so we do voice over IP services, and the voice over IP services right over the internet. And in many cases, we use the we're using the internet that, Connor's company or another MSP has set up, and the firewall on their entire network. So it's very, very cyclical, very close.
I was reading something recently when I was doing my research on voice over IP, and I've had voice over IP phones probably for 10 years, if not, well, probably even longer. And what I was reading was that they talked about stability, and it kind of like chuckled and said, yeah, in the beginning, which would be years ago, before you had, I don't know, it's T1s or gigabyte, connections or whatever it is into the system, there were issues that, because you're using a slow broadband, that there would be gaps in your phones. But I think it's fair to say that with the high-speed internet technology that we use today, there's no issues whatsoever on that anymore, other than if your IT goes down, if your internet goes down, that's a whole different story. The same thing as if power went out, the electric company.
Yeah, so I mean, the internet's improved significantly. Voice is much more sensitive than normal data traffic. So like your computer could seem like it's working perfectly, but your phone system, if the internet is having quality problems, or you don't have an MSP that knows what they're doing, like TechWorks does, then you could have quality issues. So that's why it's always important for your phone company and for your MSP to work together tightly. So we're not, doing the blame game. Everyone's working together to try to solve the problem for the clients. But the quality, to answer your question, the quality has improved significantly in the last 10 years because you have things like fiber where there's symmetrical upload and download speed. When you're on a phone call and you're talking to someone, you're uploading your voice to them. And when someone's talking to you, they're downloading their voice back to you. So you need more or less the same speed. So your speed is only as fast as the lowest man. So on a cable modem, for instance, where you might have 400 megabytes over 40 megabytes, your real speed for voice traffic is 40 megabytes. It's the lower number. So now that you have fiber where it's typically symmetrical, meaning equal, so 500 over 500, for instance, you're now at a much faster speeds, and that's signs of the internet improving, which help provide better services for my products and for Connor's products as well.
Okay. Is it fair to again to say, because we're on a Zoom call, that's sort of like voice over IP?
Yes.
See, so it's breaking up. Then I guess the sounds pretty good, guys. All right, we'll let somebody laugh about that. The rest of you just kind of come along. That actually transitions to a great question for Connor, and I talk about this. I was at a presentation that your president, Chris Coluccio, did a while back called Basics, Technologies That Every Business Should Have. And I was just absolutely fascinated with that. Can you talk about that? What are the basics that we should have?
Sure.
And I'm getting my notes out, so I'm going to make sure you got it all.
No, I remember you came up to me after that and said, "This is fantastic. We got to get Chris to speak at one of these things." But you got me today, so I'm gonna try to remember some of his basics, and then I'll tell you some of mine. So multi-factor authentication, that's number one. You need to have multi-factor authentication on both your 365 environment, on your computer, so it's you logging in every day. Any accounts, your bank account, your CRM, any business critical applications. Multi-factor authentication, hopefully we can get into this a little deeper, is one of the main ways these bad actors can get into networks when people don't have that. So put multi-factor authentication on everything you can. When it's an option, take it. Second, I would say cyber awareness training, cybersecurity training, things to look out for. Human error is the root cause of almost every breach. And that could be somebody going to a site that's malicious, a site that they shouldn't be going to, clicking on a link in an email, and in a phishing email that they shouldn't have clicked on, that gives someone access into your entire network. And with cyber awareness training, and there's very cost-effective ways to implement that into an organization. Cyber awareness training, one, it'll lower a cyber insurance premium if you have it. but two, it shows staff and users what to look out for, because these bad actors are becoming more and more smarter as the days go on. And we could touch more into that as well. Backups, make sure all your data is being backed up, not just in one spot. Have a secondary source, maybe back it up to the cloud, offsite it, what have you. So if your computer dies, whatever's on your desktop, you can recover that. And my personal favorite, I would say, is make sure you have a professional email solution. Not only just for credibility, hey, I have an AOL email, Connor@AOL.com or at hotmail.com. One, credibility, it makes you look more professional, but more importantly, there's features behind professional grade emails like Office 365, encryption, spam filtering, and things like that you need for your business. So again, it makes it more difficult for those bad actors to get into your network.
You really, you're beautiful, because you touched on about 5 different questions that I'm going to ask you. Let's see if I can hit them. So I love this one. I was quizzing my wife the other day on what's 2FA, and that is.
So two-factor authentication, multi-factor authentication, pretty much the same thing. The same thing.
Now, when you talk about that, that's when you go to sign into a site and it says, I'm sending a code to your phone.
Correct.
Or some other mechanism. So you guys really talked about that one a lot at that presentation. And as much as I hate them because they're a pain in the neck, especially every time you go into your bank, I listened to what you guys said. And now anywhere and everywhere that I have two-factor authentication capabilities, I have enabled them. So you'd be very proud of me. And it touches on the point is, you tell us all these things that we should do, and then we don't do them. So by show of hands in the gallery, how many of you use 2FA? All right.
But
That's
I have
why
a
we're
question.
friends.
But I have a question on that. So when it's dictated to me, I do it. But if it's not, I don't. Or if it's asked, I do it. But is there a way to, if it's not offered, is there a way to demand it?
For what specifically? For your
I'm not
computer,
even sure.
for a certain website?
I mean, I don't, for let's say entering my own computer every day, I don't have two-factor authorization.
So there's small add-ons. We have something called Duo. I think it's like $3 a month for everyone's workstation. So some people keep their computers in the office, and God forbid, this isn't going to happen in our office, but in somebody's office, if they had their password under their keyboard and the cleaning person came in and saw the password, they'd be able to get in right with that into the computer with that password if they didn't have this Duo two-factor authentication. In our office, if I for some reason had my password on my desk and the cleaning person or somebody broke in, a criminal, what have you, put that password in, I'll get a notification on my phone saying, are you trying to log into your computer right now? And if it's 3 in the morning and I'm in bed, I'm going to click deny and know something's going on. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so it's basically, is Duo something I could download from the internet, or something I need to get from you, or?
We can talk about that offline. I don't think it's something you could just download. We get it from one of our, distribution centers, if you will. It is a license. You might be able to get it offline or something similar, but we can definitely talk about that offline if you'd like.
I'll check on that one for you guys.
To touch on one other thing, there's a new term out there. It's MFA fatigue. And basically, it often happens with Office 365 is they want you to re-authenticate every 30, 60, 90 days. And if that message pops up on your phone, hey, Office 365 wants to approve this sign-in, sometimes people might just be like, oh, it's just asking me again, I'm going to hit approve. But if you really look at it, it might say, hey, someone's trying to log into your device from a different country. And you don't want to approve that because you just gave somebody the access into your network, into your 365 environment.
All right, you're monopolizing the conversation here. We want to talk about telephones.
Eric, your turn.
Well, before we get
All
there, I
right.
think it's important to talk about MFA is one tool, but using different passwords is almost as important as 2FA. And I know I saw the notes, something Connor might want to touch on really quickly is just a password manager. Because if someone gets, your cell phone or something, they could break into your codes or whatever, but you don't necessarily want to have the same password everywhere. If you use password, and someone breaks into one site because the site gets hacked, you're screwed everywhere. So what could you do, Connor, to easily have different passwords in different places?
Password manager, softball. Thank you, buddy. Password manager, something like RoboForms. If you've heard of LastPass, that is another one, but they had a breach recently, so we don't recommend anyone.
Wait, time. So the password manager had a breach.
Right.
That's nice.
So yeah, so that was a big problem. So we said anyone who's using, LastPass, change to something else like RoboForms. And what a password manager does is it only forces you to remember one very strong password. So as long as you know that, you can get into everything else, as all of your passwords are saved in the password manager in an encrypted format, not just a plain text format. When you go to something on Google, hey, Google wants to save your password, that is not a password manager. That can be, hacked, for lack of a better term, by anyone who knows anything about computers. They can see your entire Google saved passwords. So that is not.
So that's the next thing that I'm changing. So that's
Wait.
Eric, you're up. You ready?
Yeah, sure.
How is it that VoIP phones are less expensive than, you ready for this? POTS lines.
So something pretty interesting has happened recently in the industry, which is POTS line deregulation. POTS stands for plain old telephone service. And so that's essentially your old copper lines. And what happened historically was that POTS lines were regulated by the government. So you could only charge so much. You had to maintain this quality of service. And the government now decided, because technology is changing and the providers are pushing them to stop regulating it, that they were going to deregulate it. So you could have a line, even if you have VoIP, maybe you kept a line for a fax or a line for an alarm system, and you're paying Verizon maybe $30 a month, $40 a month, whenever Verizon decides to, and I've seen it a lot in the city already, they could just start charging you $400 a month for that same service. We had a client, they're a non-for-profit out in Stony Brook area. They have like 50 properties they own, and essentially they just maintain an alarm line in each property, and their bills are they're skyrocketing because it's just so expensive with this deregulation. It's expensive to maintain copper wires for the provider, and the providers really just want to push everyone off of it. And if they can't, they're saying, well, pay us a stupid amount of money. So yes, in that sense, it's definitely could be cheaper because we don't charge that type of premium. But also when you do a hosted VoIP system like what we do, or cloud-based VoIP, we're providing you with the phone service, we're providing you with the phone numbers, we're providing you with all the telecom minutes, all the customer support. So you're paying us a monthly operating fee, essentially an OpEx expense, to maintain and to run your phone system, as opposed to going out and paying a capital expense and then paying to buy a system for tens of thousands of dollars, and then going and buying a customer support contract on top of that, and paying for all the minutes and the service, SIP trunks or POTS lines. Essentially, you have to pay for all that on top of the expense that you already bought the phone system. And oftentimes when we start to do the math, it winds up being cheaper to use a hosted VoIP system. Plus, it gives you a lot more features and functionality. So you could be because it's hosted in the cloud. You don't need to be in one location. You could have apps on your cell phone, and you could be making business phone calls from.
All right, wait, slow down for a second, because now you're taking away all the questions that I want to ask you. And then what happens is they all get blurred into one. So let's take that piece by piece. And I'm going to ask you some really hard questions here. So fasten your seatbelt. You ready?
Yep.
All right, the question's VoIP over, VoIP, it's voice over internet. Can these phones be anywhere?
So yes, the phones could essentially be anywhere. So us, we're a US based company. So for our customers, anywhere you take a phone, it's in the US, but we have some customers that have overseas call centers. One of the trends we're seeing is that people are hiring employees in different countries and they want them to act as receptionists or secretaries, especially like the medical practice fields. They'll have someone that does scheduling and they'll be sitting in the Philippines, taking calls, making appointments. So we put a soft phone on their computers. Soft phone is just a piece of software that looks like a phone and you could dial from it and you use, your earbuds with Bluetooth connected to your computer and you make and receive phone calls. So that's
Let's try these as yes and no answers. Because you get, again, you're too funny. I've got like 4 more questions, and I'm checking them off. You covered this, you covered this. So let's make this so that we get a little more emphasis on them. And that is, do you need a special VoIP telephone?
Yes.
Okay, now you can expand about it. What do you mean?
Sure.
How special does it have to be?
It's not that it has to be special, but there's if you have a old system that's a VIA system or an NEC system, they're designed to work with the copper lines and they're designed to plug into a phone system. So you need a VoIP capable phone. There's tons of different varieties and every provider has their own likes and dislikes and buying power with certain manufacturers. But it has to be a SIP 2.0 compliant device.
So the off-white hanging on the wall dial phone that was in my kitchen doesn't apply. That doesn't work.
Typically it doesn't. We do have devices we have that we could call ATAs or analog telephone adapters, which you can use to make those types of devices work, but you lose a lot of feature functionality when you do that.
And the other side of it is when we say special, it's not that it doesn't have to be a special phone. It has to be a VoIP type of phone, and you have many of them. And I like what you talked about is from a billing standpoint, we're paying per phone. I'm not paying necessarily per line. I'm not paying for all the different. I'm not paying for the minutes.
Right.
I'm paying for the phone, and all the features that come with it.
Yeah, so I mean, it depends on how you want to define it. Some people define it per phone, per extension, per user, but essentially it dials down to the same thing.
All right, and I can have a phone in my office, and I can have a phone at home.
Yes,
and they're both the same extension.
they could be.
So that if I remember my days in the office, I would log into the phone, whatever location I was, and so that the system knew where I was and directed all my calls to that phone, that base unit.
Yes.
What about extensions? How do they work in VoIP technology?
I mean, an extension is an extension. So, and every phone with us has an extension. Sometimes people choose to have direct numbers or direct DIDs, which stands for direct inward dial, which is basically a phone number that points only to your phone. But most of our customers, since the advent of cell phones, don't usually get DIDs anymore for each employee. It just seems to be a downward trend. So they'll have an extension number, and they can have a DID if they want, but they don't necessarily need it because instead of calling directly to their office, now people are calling directly to their cell phone. But you can.
Oh, okay. So I have a number from my office, and I have a cell phone number, and you're saying people are now they're skipping the office number and going right to the cell phone.
I'm saying that they'll still call the main office if they want to get someone in the office, but rather than having a direct number, they'll put their cell phone number down instead.
That's always a good one. I always, I see the office number and I see the cell phone number and I go, which one should I call? So, Elliot, when you see that, do you call the office? You call the cell phone?
I typically send an email. No, I would call the cell phone.
All right. So I was saying, so I can switch between my office and my home. The idea being that if you're a hybrid worker, it doesn't matter where you are, the phone will find me, so to speak.
Yes.
Sometimes like attorneys or people have FINRA licenses in the financial world. They're supposed to use work phones because they're recorded. But almost everyone else uses cell phones now. I mean,
Depends on the
Hate it.
scale of the business. So, I mean, and what you're trying to do. Some people don't necessarily want that invasion of privacy. So they will want to not put their cell phone number on their business card, and they're only put the thing. It really depends on role. So Jay, like me and you, we're in a sales role. So of course I put my cell phone on the card, and I want people to call my cell phone. But if I'm in a support operations role, I don't necessarily want people to have my cell phone number. I don't want to get a call on Saturday from someone because when I shouldn't be getting that call. So it's really depends on industry, depends on what your role is, and in my opinion anyway, about if I'm going to put that on the card or not.
And the other thing you're talking about is if I always liked, I didn't want to give out my cell phone because it was my personal phone as well, is I like to give out my direct dial number. And then when I was out of the office, I could forward my calls to my cell phone. So I never missed a call if I didn't want to.
Yeah, so
That's one
now,
of your features.
yeah, so but now what I would recommend is using our mobile app on the cell phone, which is a good compromise because you could turn the mobile app on and off. So you could still give people access to your cell phone, but you could set your status essentially to away, and then your cell phone won't ring. You'll still see the missed notification, and you could choose to call back. And on top of that, the method you're talking about, if you wanted to call that customer back, you would be calling them back from your cell phone number. But with the mobile app, you're actually calling them back from your business number.
Right. That's a good feature. I always look at it, and I think I told you the story once, is I was evaluating a new phone system for a company, and they kept on asking me, what are the features? Why, what are the benefits of this new system? And I said, besides the fact that the old one's 20 years old and we can't buy parts other than on eBay, that, if it breaks, we're in trouble. It does voicemail. And they said, well, the old one does voicemail. It does, messages, it does this. They kept on saying it does these things, but the truth is that a VoIP system has a lot of features, many features, like that mobile app that make you very versatile and easily accessible. You want to rattle off a couple of those special features?
Yeah, so I mean, you started with voicemail, which obviously we have, but it's a little more sophisticated now. You have voicemail to email where you get an audio attachment if you choose right on your email. We're just in the process of launching voicemail transcription. So you could actually get a transcription service where it's written out for you. Jay mentioned earlier for some more compliant heavy industries, call recording. So we could do call recording. If it's something where there's like agents, you have eavesdrop where you can listen in on the call as a supervisor. You also have whisper where you could coach the person and only they could hear you. So the caller doesn't know that they're necessarily being trained. We have some new software actually that we released fairly recently, which is more call center based, where you could actually get all sorts of crazy metrics and see who's online, who they're on a call with. You could even with that software see their screens as they're on with clients taking calls, so you can see their monitors and what they're doing. There's all sorts of different features, and really we try to tailor to the industry and the specific person that we're talking to understand what they need. Because our approach, like Connor's, is very consultative. So we don't want to just list out, because there's probably at this point close to 100 features. We don't want to just list out, this feature, that feature, that feature. We have a conversation with them. We understand you're a lawyer. Here's some things that I think would be interesting to you. And we start talking about those features with them. And then if they have something specific in mind, we always see if there's a way that we could do it. Another thing we just recently launched was CRM integrations. So we have integrations into many different CRM systems, Freshdesk, HubSpot. And actually, we started this because Connor's boss, Tom, had a request from one of their customers for an integration with HubSpot. So we went out and we researched and we found a way to build that feature. So having the ability to build and develop is also something that you get with working with our company. And so I have to thank Tom Moore for that, because that really pushed that in that direction.
I like that. I like the interaction between the two, and they're constantly pushing each other to improve. So I'm going to jump back to Connor for a minute and ask you a couple of really hard questions as well. I back up my computer to a USB drive every night. Is that sufficient?
How do you know that it's being backed up correctly? How do you know that the files that went over to the drive are not corrupt? Where do you put that USB drive? Do you put it in, your top drawer right next to your computer? What if, God forbid, your house burned down and both your computer and the drive is now, poof, in air? It's not a professional way to do it. Some people will still do it, but again, there's definitely a lot more cost-effective ways and professional ways, secure ways to back up your data. Your data is your business. You don't have your data, for most companies, you're not going to be in business. So there's better ways to be doing it than that. You'll say, hey, I'm doing it every night. Oh, now I'm doing it every Wednesday. And now I'm doing it once a month. And now I'll do it when I get to it. It's not the right way to do it. Some people require it or request it. Hey, I want to back up my data 4 times a day, once a day. Once a day is really what we'd recommend for the most part. But it's all about, hey, if you didn't have your data, if you have 20 people working for you and you lost a week's worth of your data, what is that going to cost the business? And that's the champion question right there.
But I'm a small fish in this big sea. My data is not important. Why would a hacker waste their time, stealing my data?
Jamie, we both talked about losing a little weight. Neither one of us are small fish these days. So
thank you very much.
But before some people have become clients, we've seen multi-million-dollar organizations, get ransomware, get breached, get hacked, and we've seen those solopreneurs, the same thing. And again, that question I always go back to is, if one day you came into your office, your computer had a blue screen, it said click here to chat, somebody got into your network and they want to start, negotiating something. If you couldn't get that back, if you couldn't get your data back, if everything just went awry and poof, gone in thin air, can you still operate your business? And that's what I always ask people. So if the answer is no, I can't operate my business without my data, then I don't care if you're a half a person.
Can I ask you a question on that?
Sure.
When they hack my computer, they're hacking the device, correct?
It depends. Sometimes.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't have a server, so I just have a device, but I store everything in the iCloud.
Okay.
So if someone takes over my device, I have a backup at home. They can't steal my iCloud, correct?
It depends. If someone got your password to your iCloud some way, you didn't have multi-factor authentication, they can go in there, they could change your password. And Apple, let me get into this Apple story in a second. As secure as Apple can be, if they have your passwords and they get in, they change your password, you are not getting back into Apple. I was just having a conversation with a different Chris in our office yesterday. A gentleman, someone that he knew very close, a gentleman passed away. He had his iCloud password saved somewhere, and his wife was trying to get into the iCloud password, I'll call it the password manager, to understand how we can get into his Chase, his banking information, all that. And Apple takes security nothing more serious than they take their security. This wife, 6 years later, is still trying to get his credentials to all of these accounts, because she doesn't have the access to it. I might have went a little off topic there, but
but staying with that for a second, Jay, my brother-in-law, his Facebook account was hacked. And what they did is they changed the password and the recovery email address. So he then goes in or tries to go in and tries to recover his password with a forgot your password. It goes to the hackers. It's been like 4 months. He's according to Facebook, he's bought a new house, a boat, he's invested in crypto. I mean, what they're doing, the misinformation that they're posting is terrible. But the answer is he lost access. And so, they're taking control over it. And like Connor was saying, he can't get it back.
That's
So
why,
it's
Jimmy,
gone.
that's why a strong password is necessary. I could almost guarantee you what happened is they hacked a site, which probably wasn't
Mhm.
Facebook. His password was the same across everything he does. And they went and they have a list of 50 different sites that they try, Walmart, Facebook, Macy's, and they go in and they try to find saved credit cards and credentials and information they could exploit. And if he had a different password in every site, sure, maybe they hack you and they get into Macy's, but your exposure is limited to Macy's. It's because that's the only site you have the password for. So while 2FA is important also, having different passwords in my mind is maybe even more important because you're limiting your exposure to everywhere. Connor could speak more about that.
Or a password manager. So for a quick example, there's a sneaker website I like called StockX. StockX had a breach. I used a certain password, let's say Connor123, to get into my StockX account. If I use that same password and that same email for my Chase account, whoever breached StockX now has millions of people's credentials. It's now on the dark web. People can buy that information for less than $1 a piece, and they'll try those same credentials for different banks. They don't know I necessarily bank with Chase, but they'll say, hey, I have Connor's email that he uses and what could be a common password. Let me see if I can use those credentials and other things that may get me more of Connor's information, such as his banking information.
So the password management program that you recommend, you said was RoboForms?
Correct.
And is that something, Jay, this is a good one. Is that something that I buy from you or I just go online and buy from them?
That one I know you can buy online. You can get it through us. It's a couple bucks a month at the most, like maybe again $2-3 a month, something like that.
All right,
But
sign me up.
Got it.
Who else is signing up for that? Jay, are you in?
I'm gonna look at it.
All right, but seriously, because I'm just sitting here listening and I'm breaking out in a cold sweat. Last question for you, Connor, and then we'll wrap this up. Is network assessment. I know that's something that we've talked about. It's something you touched on as you started. When you get a new client or as you approach a potential new client, you talk about network assessment.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
So at TechWorks, we have a proven process that begins with a network assessment. Every engagement begins with a network assessment. So very often people will call me and say, hey, Connor, what does it cost to support my organization's IT? I know nothing about your network. I know nothing about your business. So we have to perform this network assessment. So a network assessment is a deep dive test to check on a company's strengths, weaknesses, risks, vulnerabilities, gaps, whatever you want to call that, within a network infrastructure. So I like to use the analogy, we're like a doctor that knows nothing about his clients until he sees the tests, the MRIs, the blood work and all that, so we can properly guide you to the recommendations on how to get healthier. So with a network assessment, we come in, we have one of our engineers come in, he runs some tools on your network, we see the applications and softwares and programs that you're using, and we see what kind of risks that you have. Maybe you're using old operating systems, maybe you don't have antivirus at the minimum on certain workstations. But we then provide you with a report. Hey, this is everything we found. Here's some things that are good. Here's some things that need improvement. And here's some things you should really do right away, i.e. put multi-factor authentication on your devices. And then from that point on, we could say, hey, we could fix these things. You could use this as a third-party unbiased opinion of somebody coming in looking at your network. You can give it back to your normal IT company, say, hey, this is what somebody uncovered, fix it. Or you can have TechWorks do it. I often don't recommend having your current IT provider do a network assessment because they're going to say everything's perfect. You have no risk whatsoever. But from that point, we could say, hey, we could fix these things. Here's our recommendations. And if you want to entertain a monitoring agreement, a support agreement, here's what it would look like at that point.
All
When
right,
you
I
do
always-
when you do
Go
a
ahead, John.
third-party assessment on someone who already has an IT provider, what percentage of the time do you say, you know, you guys are good?
There has never been, I've been with TechWorks 3 years. I have dozens of assessments that I've been on with the engineer. I have never been to an environment, a small environment, a large environment that was perfect. There's always room for improvement and tightening up the security posture. I thought we were at someone that was perfect. You know, we usually have our post discussion without the client afterwards. You know, everything was going very well. And I said to the engineer, Jared, I'm like, they seem to be in a pretty good spot. When we get in the car going back, I'm like, they seem to be in a pretty good spot. You know, everything he said kind of checked off all the boxes. And then he goes, yeah, well, some of the things that I noticed on the network with some external vulnerabilities and things like that, there's definitely some room for improvement on the network. So someone may think they're perfect, is my point, until someone really gets in there and does that deep dive analysis.
All right,
I remember.
So I'm
Another
sorry, Jay.
question.
I keep on interrupting you, but no, you're here. You're the paying customer. Ask as many questions as you want.
So years ago, I heard a cybersecurity expert speak back before most people didn't care about it. It was more for major corporations or government installations. Basically, what he said was pretty much anything can be hacked if you spend enough money on it. And pretty much almost anything can be protected if you spend enough money on it. And the key is to get the right balance. So Jay Ryan's little company does not need the protection that NORAD needs. But, you know, so that's another, I mean, I think if I went to you guys, I'd trust you not to over secure me.
Sure.
But do you think I would imagine there are people who pay more than they need to be secure.
The other analogy I love to express is pretend you're a burglar, pretend you're a criminal outside of two houses. One house on the left has a screen door, the windows are open, you know, you see the curtains flying because the windows are open. And the house on the right has a Ring doorbell, has a Rottweiler chain to a, chain as security. It's got bars on the windows. It's got some deadbolts, security cameras. You being the criminal, which one are you going to try to break into?
I'm thinking there's a lot more valuable shit in the one that's well protected.
Good point. But let's say you don't have either clue what's in either house. But
well, if I'm a drug addict who needs a fix, I'm going through the screen door.
There you go. And I know you're not.
All right. So what Jay is saying is if you're a desperate low-level criminal, you go for the low-hanging fruit. If you're a sophisticated high-end criminal, you go for the challenge. That's great. All right.
My point of that story, just to sum it up real quick, is you want to make it as difficult as possible for these bad actors to get into a network. Put as many security features in place so they say, all right, these guys got so many protection layers, I'm going to buzz off and try going to the next guy.
Not worth my time.
Not worth my time.
There's a lot of automated tools that are trying to hack you. So the guys aren't actually actively doing it. So it's not like I'm sitting in front of a keyboard trying to hack Connor. But if I have a tool that I start running, it's only going to scan so many things. And when it finds a vulnerability, then it's going to notify Connor, hey, this guy's an easy target. So if you have more protection, that tool's never going to notify Connor, hey, let's go after this guy. So does that make sense, Connor? Is that?
Yep, absolutely.
Connor, when talking about protecting the network, in that presentation, again, I was so impressed with the scope of what you guys did and the simplicity in how you presented it so that we were able to understand it. A couple of things that I took out of that were keep the hardware current. And I really thought that was an interesting one because you talked about, again, current hardware has the benefits and features. Even Eric, you talked about that in the newfangled VoIP, phones have many features. So it's about keeping your hardware current. The other was use antivirus software. Another one was, change passwords and use password management. And probably I'm going to give away my question by the answer, or give away my answer by asking, is employee training. And you talked about how the true majority of hacks are through human error. if you could do only one of those four things for a customer, which one would you recommend they do?
They're all extremely important. I would recommend all of them, but knowing that most breaches come from human error, I'd probably lean on the employee training, but I have to have the caveat as far as the keeping hardware current. You can't have a Windows 7 operating system. So to piggyback off what Eric just said, when software is being ran, looking for those vulnerabilities, hey, these businesses have old operating systems that aren't staying up to date. There's known vulnerabilities. That is so very important as well.
Just to add
I'll
another
give you-
thing, employee training covers a lot of the other things Connor just mentioned. When you talk about password security, and that's employee training. When you talk about password managers, that's employee training. There are even free tools out there you don't have to pay for password managers if the employee wants. So there's, again, it all falls under two-factor authentication, using it. That's employee training, company policy. So a lot of it all falls under one umbrella.
All right, give you a hint. The answer was E, all of the above, one at a time, pick a priority. Employee training was my guess. Eric, last chance for you is, why go to VoIPX? Why institute a voice over IP telephone system? What's, E, all of the above, but which is the first one?
Because Jamie told them to. That's the answer.
All right.
Yeah, so with us, the reason to go with VoIPX is really, if you're a business and you're a busy professional, you don't want to worry about the phone system. What we focus on for our clients is customer service and doing everything for our clients. Most of our competitors will come in and they'll say, here's a website, here's some training videos, here's how you set up your phones. Whereas we take the opposite approach. We get on the phone with you, we interview you, we learn about your business, and we set up the phones for you so that all you have to do is plug the phones into a power cord and an Ethernet cable, and they're working. And if you need changes because it's a holiday or an employee moves or whatever it might be, we take care of everything for you. So let us focus on the phone system so you can focus on your business.
All right. Well, thank you both. For those of you out here listening, you heard it. It's third-party expertise makes your life easier and actually brings down your costs. So if anybody would like to learn more about VoIPX or TechWorks Consulting, feel free to reach out to me, Jamie Austin, at PSP Turnkey Solutions, and I'll be happy to make a formal introduction for you.